John Locke is the father of classical liberalism. His core political ideas and doctrines are really at the heart of constitutional law and Anglo-American jurisprudence.
The nature of American politics and government has a large foundation in Enlightenment thought. The Enlightenment was a movement in the 17th and 18th centuries referred to as the Age of Reason, one in which empiricism gave way to new understanding about the nature of ideas such as individual liberty and religious tolerance. Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau greatly influenced the writing of the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, our most significant protection of individual and human rights. Among these safeguards is the 8th Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, the 5th Amendment's Due Process Clause, and the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. With these protections comes the question of capital punishment, and how or if to implement it. Here are the debated issues. Supporters of the death penalty claim that it is a deterrent to crime. Opponents argue that the death penalty is only an after-the-fact punishment that does not deter future heinous crimes.
If the death penalty is a deterrent, if that's the purpose of it, it's not working. I didn't need a poll to tell me that's not why we do it. We do it for vengeance, okay?
Here's the issue. The United States incarcerates more per capita than any other nation on earth. We've got the highest prison population and longer prison terms than elsewhere. We're one of the few countries with a death penalty. So this massive deterrent effect, the notion that somehow for every life you kill or end by violence, you save others, it just doesn't make any sense.
Keeping death row inmates wastes taxpayer money. However, appeals can extend the execution process indefinitely and cost more money than it would to imprison the offender for life without parole.
The death penalty doesn't cost. If you want to save the state money in these dire economic times, reform the appeals process. It's the appeals process that costs.
Opponents of the death penalty argue that many innocent lives may be lost. However, advocates of the death penalty are willing to risk the possibility of putting one innocent person to death in order to put many more guilty people to death.
Innocent people are sitting on death row right now that have been exonerated through DNA or have been put to death in this country, and you can't unwind that clock.
Many claim that the victim's rights supersede the rights of the convicted. The Constitution, however, has specific protections for the rights of the accused, including the 8th and 5th Amendments.
There have been victims, or there have been the families and loved ones of victims who have been killed, and they want to see that killer put to death. They think it's going to give themselves some closure. They feel it's the right thing to do. It's the just thing to do. That person killed my mother, my daughter, my son, my whatever, and therefore that person should die, and that will help me get over it and get on with my life. What about that argument?
I think that's self-indulgent nonsense. I mean, the fact of the matter is a person whose loved one has been destroyed by an act of violence isn't going to be repaired by killing another person. Gandhi once said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. As a matter of common law, we say that no person can be a judge in our own case, but yet then we yield the courthouse to victims in these cases and say, whatever you like, dear.
The Golden Rule also reminds us of our responsibility to protect and defend human life at every stage of its development.
The Pope has said, quote, "The dignity of human life must never be taken." The Pope also says that the death penalty is both cruel and unnecessary.
Well, I believe that the death penalty is appropriate in certain circumstances. They're extraordinarily heinous crimes.
I mean, the death penalty is a serious issue. I expressed my own preference that I'd rather have a society where we didn't have to use death as a punishment. That view and that preference was overruled by the legislature and also by the people.
To me, the issue of life is not a political issue. It's a human rights issue, and it's a difficult issue. I just believe deeply that all human life is worthy of the protection of our laws.
Proponents of the death penalty say that methods for performing capital punishment are swift and efficient. However, opponents argue that current death penalty practices are inhumane and by definition are cruel and unusual, as lethal injection and electrocution have proven to be inconsistent and that they have often left the accused in prolonged agony.
Joining us today, Ron McAndrew. This is a bit of a rare opportunity here to talk with a former warden who was superintendent of the Florida prison where death row inmates were with you. 10 years or so when you went to Stark, how did you feel about the death penalty? Were you in support of it?
Oh, I was totally in support of the death penalty at that time.
Why?
I thought it was the right thing to do. I had experienced 2 murders in my own family in years past. I despised the people who had committed these murders. When one of them committed suicide in prison, I was not displeased at all. I was a pretty hardcore kind of guy, and that's probably one of the reasons I was selected to go to Florida State Prison, because they knew I could handle it, as the expression went. It didn't take very long. You get up close to an execution, you're standing 3 or 4 feet away from a man who is departing this earth. You smell the flesh burning on the top of his head. You see the steam coming out from underneath the mask that's coming from his eyes, his nostrils, his mouth, his ears. You see the tenseness in the body where the hands come to a tight fist, gripping the oak on the 3-legged chair he's sitting in. And you just have to stop and ask yourself, what in the heck are you doing? It's wrong.
Do we as Americans value the right to life? Is it possible that we abuse the use of the death penalty? What is the general consensus on its use? Are there alternatives to capital punishment? Is an eye for an eye a viable solution to heinous crimes? Would you personally be able to inject the poison, pull the switch on the chair, or pull the trigger